Daisy.
And I'm Terry.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 214.
And this week, it's Daisy's turn to share something with us. Daisy, what do you have?
Well, Terry, I don't have a great deal. We were laughing about this before we started. You're incredibly busy too, and you always find more time to prepare than I have this week. But a newsletter caught my eye, and I thought, well, this is going to be interesting. So the sort of presentation element will be very brief, but I thought it was an interesting thing to talk about. And this is one of the few newsletters that I've remained signed up to, that I do usually read. And it's from Susan David, who I think we've both shared content from her in the past. And it's her Emotional Agility newsletter. And I think that's probably the name of her book. And it's entitled The Hidden Benefit of Quitting. I thought, well, that sounds interesting. And she's basically talking about the difference. And there's a great little pictorial meme type thing she does. I'll figure out if there's a way I can share that. Because I did have a look to see, sometimes these newsletters have links to a blog on their website, and this one doesn't seem to. So you have to sign up to her newsletter to get the content. I'll see if there's a way I can just share this meme. The meme is entitled, How to Know When to Grit and When to Quit. And we've talked a lot about grit in the past, haven't we? Brené Brown is big on grit. And I was trying to remember, I can't for the life of me remember, who you shared fairly recently talking about grit. Can you remember?
Was it Angela Duckworth?
Yes, it might have been. I remember you doing an episode talking around that. So it is something that we've talked about before. And so back to the newsletter. She says, the world has likely instilled in you the importance of passion and persistence. Grit is embedded in our cultures, from the British keep calm and carry on to the American when the going gets tough, the tough get going. We're told, aren't we, that this importance of really sticking with something. And she cites the 10,000 hours that apparently Malcolm Gladwell popularized. And you've spoken about this before, that people who are cited as geniuses, not to say that they're not geniuses, but they've got there through grit and determination and 10,000 hours of practicing something. And so she says, there are many, many reasons to celebrate grit. The things that we value most, from meaningful relationships to professional triumphs, require us to persist through challenging times. As I said at the beginning, we've both shared episodes talking about grit and the importance of that. Apparently, Thomas Edison reportedly churned out more than 1,000 unsuccessful prototypes before inventing a working light bulb. Where would we be, she says, if he threw up his hands after failure number 500? But she says, despite all its virtues, it is possible to overvalue grittiness. Just as important as the discipline to grit is the self-awareness to know when to quit. I thought that was quite an interesting sentence in itself. The discipline to grit and the self-awareness to know when to quit. I think that's sort of quite telling of what's to come. Perseverance is a necessary ingredient for human thriving, but we must be thoughtful about what we're persevering at and why. She says there's nothing admirable about working doggedly towards a goal that no longer matters to you, and there's nothing shameful about reevaluating your path. Whatever that is, whether it's maybe ending a relationship that you've invested many years in, shelving a screenplay that's just not working, or choosing to maintain your work-life balance and leave the office on time the night before a big presentation. The choice not to grit can be a very difficult one. No one wants to feel like a quitter. And it's especially hard to step back from something we've come to see as integral to our identity. But she says, and I am pretty well just reading her newsletter, by the way, not all goals are attainable, and many can cost us dearly in other aspects of our lives. If a long-standing commitment no longer feels rewarding to you, you need to listen to those feelings and take them seriously. And so she asks you to consider the following questions when you're choosing whether to grit or to quit. What opportunities will I give up if I pursue this? Does this reflect what is important to me, my values? Does this draw on my strengths? Deep down, do I truly believe this can be a success? Does this bring me joy or satisfaction? And this last one, yes, this applies. This applies to me quite often. Am I demonstrating grit or am I being obstinate? So she ends by saying, consider who it is that you want to be and where it is that you want to go. Quitting can be a hard choice to make, but often it's a brave one as well. And I just thought that was really interesting. I thought it was a really interesting thing to discuss, and I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on it. And going off on a bit of a tangent, but I wonder if it applies. What came to my mind, maybe with that obstinate thing, but I've certainly done this. When you've invested time, when you've invested money in something, you can feel like, well, I can't quit at that because I put so much time in or I put so much money in. But you know deep down that it's not the right path, and the best decision is to just let it go and quit that and pursue something else. And I think this is one of the reasons why I get so stressed making decisions, because I don't want to invest that time and money and then quit. And, you know, I'm sure that's not an unusual sentiment to have, but, you know, I get really stressed on that. And I wonder if part of my issue with not wanting to let belongings go. Remember, we had this conversation where I was dreading clearing out my barn when I lived in France because I would never say no. If somebody offered me something, here, you know, do you want this? I would just always say yes and put it in the barn. And I think it's Gretchen Rubin who talks about the importance of not letting things into your life in the first place. Make that decision at that moment when someone makes that offer. Because once you've got it, once you've taken it home, it then becomes really difficult to get rid of it. Then all these decisions are involved. Because what do you do with it? Do you give it away? Do you give it to a charity shop? Do you try and sell it? Do you throw it away? And it becomes just this stressful thing. I think it just taps into that thing. It taps into those feelings of having spent money on acquiring these goods or having invested something, even if it's just the thought process of this dilapidated old piece of furniture that I know I could make something nice out of. So I'm just going to hold on to it for 20 years, never actually get around to doing it. But it causes stress, doesn't it, to hold on to these things? And I know that's off on a bit of a tangent, but it kind of feels like it's a bit connected. So I don't know what you think about that. You can probably see through the meanderings of my slightly confused brain to come up with something sensible out of all that.
Yeah, I think I heard part of a theme in that part, Daisy, as kind of being obstinate.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to do this. I said I was going to do this. I bought this, therefore I will do it. Versus being willing to say, okay, I bought it for a reason then, but the reason has now changed. And, you know, this being part of the growth mindset. And I recently read an article that I think kind of dovetails here, but talking about grit being so important in the lives of people who reach success in whatever they're doing. But part of that is in the growth mindset, persisting and moving toward things with that open growth mindset versus that closed mindset. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, being obstinate can actually become a fixed mindset. Nope, I bought it. I said I would do it, and I will.
Oh, that makes
Okay,
sense.
but
Yeah.
you've now moved it 3 times. It's taken up storage space in 3 different places you've lived. You've paid. My partner and I, when we moved recently, we added up some things when we kind of figured out what the square foot or cubic foot cost of moving was.
I remember you doing that.
And I had a bookcase that if we moved it, it would have cost more to move it. And it was, 4 years old. It would have cost more to move it than to buy it again when we got here.
So unless it's got sentimental value, there's no point.
That's right.
Even then, maybe not, but...
Another example was towels. She said, Terry, we can go to Costco and buy new towels cheaper than we can ship a box of towels. But it's that getting stuck in our way of thinking. And my way of thinking is, why would we buy new towels if we have perfectly good towels?
Yeah.
But transferring them 1,000 miles in a truck is going to cost more than getting new ones. But the other thing that I think this article that I'm pulling in with this talks about is that grit is really a combination of passion and perseverance. And without the passion, perseverance often leads to burnout.
I like that. Yeah.
So just that kind of dogged, no, I said I'm going to and I'm going to, often leads us to that point of burnout because we no longer have the passion connected to why we're doing this thing. Now, I don't know the background, but if Edison had lost his passion and just said, nope, I'm on contract, I'm going to do this. I know he wasn't on contract, but it's not the same process. And it's depressing, it's demoralizing, it's not motivating, it's not exciting. But grit, perseverance with passion is totally worth it. I'll try the 10,003rd attempt if I need to, because I still have the passion and that desire to persevere and reach that goal. So I think that's a big piece for a lot of us. And for some of us, I think maintaining the passion is finding that there is still inherent value in the task or the goal. So if I start out on something and I'm very passionate about it and I really believe it's going to happen, I just need to put in the hard work, that's good grit. But if a year later I'm still doing it, not moving closer to the goal, and now the goal doesn't have meaning to me, to me, that's a sign of this is the right time to quit. Because at this point, continuing to invest my energy, my thought processes, my time hold little value in what I'm going to get from it. And now in some ways, like economically, that's a bad business decision. You don't keep investing more when the payoff is too low. And I think that's part of figuring this out, when it's the right time to push forward and keep going. And when is it the time, and some of us might even say it like this, to cut our losses? Yes, I've invested a couple hundred hours into this, but now I see that I don't want the end result I wanted before, or that end result isn't going to happen the way I had planned. Do I keep just kind of stubbornly doing it for the sake of I said I would? Or do we reevaluate? Is the outcome now worth investing more? So again, if you kind of go financially, if I invested $100 in this and realize I don't think it's going to work, does it make sense for me to invest $200 in it?
Yeah.
And sometimes I think quantifying things in a different realm helps us weigh it out differently. Some of us, in our time and our energy, we don't quantify that in a way. And we're like, no, I should just keep doing it then. But all of our time is worth something financially, it's worth something relationally. And if I say, just because I said I would, I kept doing this, what did I give up? Did I give up relationship time? Did I give up work time that I could have been earning? What did it cost me to keep doing? And I think part of this whole equation is really continuing to weigh out a cost-benefit ratio. But if getting to that light bulb creation that he was working on, if that was still worth it, it doesn't matter. You're going to spend 10 more hours today and all weekend because it's worth it.
I love how you pulled in the growth versus fixed mindset, because I think for me anyway, that helps me get my head around the biggest stumbling block is that decision, making that decision to cut your losses, whatever you want to call it, to quit, however you want to phrase it. The thing that I struggle most with is stressing about the time, the money, whatever it is that you've invested already, wasting that.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you approach that decision with the growth mindset rather than the fixed mindset,
all that time spent was worth it.
It was worth it because the very least you can take from that is a lesson well learned.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that doesn't mean that, probably doesn't mean anyway, that you'll be able to completely be able to let go the irritation, the stress of losing the money, whatever it is, but you'll have learned from it. Case in point, I was chatting to a builder a couple of doors down. He's working on the garden outside and doing a great job, I have to say. I will be recommending him. But I get a perfect view sitting at my kitchen table. So when I'm eating my meals and they're working, I get to watch at what they're doing. And I've been watching them dig out a load of soil, and the most beautiful topsoil, bag it up, move it through the house, not quite as onerous as mine. They can go straight through on the ground floor level. They don't have to go down steps and up steps, but still, they've got to put it in bags, carry it through the house, and then they paid to have that taken away. And they've now dug out for some footings, and it's the subsoil that's come up, and that's what's going to be going back in. And I said to him, I've got to say this, and I should have come and said it to you as it was happening, and I'm sorry that I didn't. I said, but I could have cried when you got rid of the most wonderful topsoil and you paid to have it taken away. And you're going to need that now. And he put his hands on his head and he said, I know. Everything was really stressful at the time. We had to get some stuff done. There was nowhere to store it. But that was the wrong decision. It's not a decision I will make again. So, I've learnt from that. And so as annoying as it is and how costly as it was, it's a really valuable lesson learned in that next time that comes up, we'll find a different way around it to not throw away a valuable resource.
And even plan ahead. So again, the value of the lesson versus getting caught up in that was a mistake. It costs us money, it costs us time, it costs us extra work. Yep, it did. But there's so much gained from having gone through the experience. Now, unless he goes to a house, next street over in next month and does the same thing again, then obviously it wasn't a lesson.
I don't think he will.
Yeah. And I think even that is hard for many of us to know. When is it? I mean, obviously this is your whole topic, but when is it time to say, okay, lesson learned, but I need to move forward? And sometimes, I think there are definitely times when we're more likely to do this. Careers we stayed in longer than what was serving us well. School or certification programs or training programs. I joined one once that I think was really great for me, but timing-wise, it was not good for me. And I can look back now and think, wow, that was a lot of money spent for something that I didn't complete. But completing it wasn't going to change that, because it would have taken so much more out of me at that time that I didn't have to give. And I know this is kind of a first world issue to be able to say, well, it doesn't matter that I spent that money, and I don't take that lightly. But that to me is a good example of when it's really hard for me to decide when to quit, when there's been money spent, money invested. And I think, like you said, for me also, that ties into why do I have all of this stuff that I have moved 14 times and I don't use it? Because I've spent money on it, and I believe I should still get my investment out of it. So I think this whole concept of when do we persevere? When do we keep moving towards something and push? And when do we back off? And many of us struggle with this partly because there are also a lot of sayings about not being a quitter, that that's somehow negative. But knowing when to stop, I think, is a skill. It's a wise skill, but we have it framed as it's just quitting. It's weakness in character.
Yeah.
And so I think some of us struggle with knowing when to stop, when to let something go, because of the connotation quitting has. And it reminds me of this thing that I used to talk a lot about with clients when I was a therapist, and they wanted to, let's say, move. I lived in Ohio at the time. They were in Ohio. Life kind of felt like it was in a dead end for them. And they said, hey, I think I want to move to California. And their family members and their friends would say, oh, you're just running away from things. Wherever you go, there you are, which I believe in. However, I think that same decision you can look at, are you running away or are you running toward? I think they struggled because it felt like I'm being a quitter. Because life is hard right now, because things aren't going where I want them to go, if I decide to pick up and try again somewhere else, is that quitting? And it was less about their own perception of it and more about other people's perceptions of it.
Right. It's really hard, isn't it? Knowing when to make that decision. Because you can look at it the other way, and I'm sure we can all think of examples when we quit too early.
Mm-hmm.
If only I just carried on with that for a bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
So you can flip the coin, and the argument for grit and perseverance when you quit too early on something. So it's all about this timing, isn't it? But I did like this list of questions.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe, we can't do it with absolutely everything we do, but certainly something that feels like it's a bigger endeavor, or you're starting to maybe have doubts about it. I suppose to regularly check in and go through that list of questions would be quite a handy thing to do, because it would either serve as, giving a bit more of a stronger voice to those little niggling doubts, and to get you to really, oh yes, I really need to have a real sit down and think about this seriously. Or by asking those questions will just reinforce the reasons you're doing it and hopefully rekindle that passion a bit.
Now, people in the US will understand this reference. I don't know if this was something that you would know across the pond there, Daisy, but I brought this up kind of jokingly in a meeting at work in TFM. And I really meant it, though. And I think it fits really well here. There's a famous song, I think it was from the late 70s, early 80s. I'm trying to remember. I was in middle school, early high school, I think, when it was still popular. And a couple of friends in school sang it all the time on the bus when we would be going somewhere. I was a statistician for the basketball team, and so they would sing it on the way to basketball games. Field trips from school, I think maybe even elementary school, so maybe it was even earlier, late 70s, early 80s, but the song just was sung all the time. And so those of you who remember Kenny Rogers and the song The Gambler. Now, you're probably thinking, what the heck does a song about gambling have to do with this? But the chorus in the song is this older gambler is teaching this younger man about it. And he says, you've got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. And it goes on and makes more connections to playing cards. But I think we struggle with that. Knowing when to hold them, knowing when to stay put, keep investing, and when to fold them and say, I'm out. Because I don't play poker, but I assume that's a hard decision.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got money at stake here. There's a chance everyone else is bluffing and I'm going to walk away with this money. Or there's a chance someone's sitting there with a great hand and I don't have much in my hand right now. How much risk do I take? When do I walk? When do I run? There's some fitting lesson here in good old Kenny Rogers' song, but figuring out when to stay put and keep investing ourselves, our energy, our time, our desire, our effort, and our finances in some examples, versus when to say, I have invested enough. It's not gaining me what I am pursuing. So I'm going to stop here and put all of that energy and time and thought and potentially finances into my next thing. And some people look at people who do this that are kind of public about it and they think, oh, they're just flaky. They just go from one thing to the next. Is it that they're flaky, or did they know when to stop investing everything?
Know when to fold. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. Brilliant. Well, thank you for bringing so much more to my meager pickings at the start. I had a feeling you would. Sounds like I've tapped into some of the things that you really like to talk about. So that was great.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for making a very interesting episode and giving me a useful slant on something that I personally find very difficult, decisions that I find difficult to make. So yes, you've given me a different way to look at that, which I think will be very helpful.
Great. It's one of those things that sometimes I'm not sure if it's a blessing or a curse, but I will take just about any topic and try to find the meaning, the lesson, the teachable moment, the depth of it. And sometimes, it's grain of sand is just a grain of sand, Terry. Let's let it go. But I appreciate you opening up this great topic and being open to exploring some more about it.
Great. Well, the sun is shining here. It's finally warm. It finally feels like summer has started. We've all been complaining in the UK that June so far has been feeling really cold and miserable and still like winter. And of course, I'm a Brit, so I have to talk about the weather. But I hope wherever you are, I know where you are, but wherever you listening are, I hope the sun is shining and that you have a very wonderful week.
Take good care of it.